My name is Maria Hayden. I am a CII team member, and I'm here to kick off session A for you today, talk a little bit more about some of the certifications that we have. I want to thank you for being here, for sticking around through lunch. And before we get into the content, I just want to say a couple words. If by chance there are some of you in this room that are not completely passionate about CII yet, I'd like to tell you why I am. My name tag says that I am a strategic intelligence, cyber intelligence analyst. And what that means for the government specifically is that I look at big picture issues, geopolitics, regional trends, and national actors to better understand cyber threats and adversaries. That should sound familiar to any of you that were here this morning. But why I love CII and why I'm humbled and thrilled to be a part of this program is because it is the only program that currently exists to bring that value to industry and to other government agencies that are outside of the intelligence community. And this program of certifications, currently 7, is the way that they do that, the way they bring that to everyone. It's available to everyone. So what we're going to do in this session is to talk about the structure and some of the content of 4 of our 7 certifications. And you can get more information about each of them on our website, which you should have in your emails, but there's also links in the documents that you have in front of you. Just a little bit of information in general. The certifications are going to be held over 5 consecutive days, so essentially a 40-hour week, and a portion of the final day will be set aside for the final examination. And at that point, upon passing, you will be granted a certification. This session is going to cover 4 of the certifications, as I mentioned. The first one is Cyber Intelligence Professional. The next is Cyber Counterintelligence Professional. The third is Cyber Intelligence and Active Defense. And the 4th is Cyber Intelligence and Counterterrorism. So here today to discuss in more detail are 2 of the lead instructors for these 4 certifications, as well as a subject matter expert that's going to provide us a value proposition. So on your left, my right, we have Professor John Segronis. He is a current professor at IWP. To his left is Geoff Hancock. You met them both earlier. He's one of the co-founders of CII, is very involved. And then to his left, we have Mr. Jem Richburg, who is the ODNI National Intelligence Manager for Cyber. So without further ado, we'll let them discuss in detail the certifications. We encourage questions throughout, and we'll ask for questions again at the end, and we'll talk about how to sign up at that point.
So, thanks. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria. Couple quick comments, really, as we get started here. I really want to describe the value proposition of Cyber Intelligence Professional certification. As you see on the screen here, we had already put up some key elements of the certification, things we'll be discussing, things we'll be looking at, and really the courseware behind that. So, Cyber Intelligence Professional, as we talked about earlier today, consists of many different aspects of cybersecurity. Some can be very, very technical, but they don't have to be technical, very detailed. There's some level of technical understanding, but then how it's applied, a method, a process, a procedure for cyber intelligence, how to gather the data, what the data looks like, the foundation of the information, internal data, external data, a variety of topics are going to be covered in the certification. As we put up there already, the definition, an organizational structure within either a federal agency or within a corporation. What does your organizational structure look like? Very few companies right now and agencies have the mechanisms in place to create a cyber intelligence process and methodology. That's one of the things we'll be talking about in the course as we go through the courses, is what that structure should look like. Based on what you have today and the gaps that may be there, how to fill that in, how to develop a mature life cycle process of cyber intelligence with your organization. Additionally, the role of cyber intelligence for both public-private partnerships and relationships. Right? We've all heard about information sharing and the value proposition that information brings, but without an internal mechanism to digest the information you're getting, it's just more information. And everybody has plenty of information today, so in this course we teach about the method to ingest a variety of information, structured, organized, and prioritized, so that your organization can do something with the information that you get, either from the government or from other threat feed companies that are available to get cybersecurity potential information for you. We also talk about threat modeling and how to know when you're a threat, or how to know when you're a target, I should say, how to identify, different audience, sorry, different audience, sorry. I'll talk about that in another place, but threat modeling is a trending, overused term, but it's a key part of what we teach in this certification. Understanding how you're valuable, how much of a threat that you have, the footprint that you have, why bad guys would look at you, what they look for, how they look for it, and how they access your data. That strategy and that operational component, and then the technical pieces that they rely on, that's key. For any organization today, whether you're focused on cyber intelligence or not, but as a professional in cyber intelligence, that is something you've got to be able to understand and articulate. What's that threat model look like? What's the footprint look like? And how do you defend against the methods of attack that you have to deal with? So it's very key to the subject. As well as the cyber intelligence lifecycle, what that is for cybersecurity. There's a traditional intelligence lifecycle. There's a cyber intelligence lifecycle, which is a little different, but it's designed to be able to help teach students the variety of inputs that they're going to be able to get and how to massage that information, and actually follows on to our next bullet point, creating a body of knowledge to be able to understand what that is, and again, how to ingest it and how to do something with it. And let me emphasize one thing here too. This is not just for government and not just for industry, right? Bad guys are bad guys are bad guys. Threat models are threat models. Threat models are a little different from DoD, the intel community, than they are for corporations. Foundationally, they're the same when it comes to cybersecurity and cyber intelligence. There are some things that are fundamental, and that's what we teach in the course. And then we start discussing what are the differences between those types. A threat model for DoD, a threat model for Kmart, if they still exist. All right, so that's what we really want to focus on. We also get into the roles and responsibilities for individuals. So this is more because, again, we're trying to address the lack of skill sets of people who are skilled in this arena. How to address and identify people within your organizations today who fall into this cyber intelligence professional role in some varying levels of degree within your organization without officially having that title or that skill set. We're able to identify who those are, who those people are. The goal here is to help you understand where you fit, where your teammates fit, so that you can help develop a mature program with your organization. And the last two really is implementing an operational plan. This is a fun, interactive part in the course because we can really work with a handful of use case models, whether created in the class or use case models we'll leverage that have already been developed. The point is being able to develop a plan of action with your organization in mind. Where you are today, where you want to be in 12 months, as a cyber intelligence professional, what your organization needs are, how to do gap analysis when it comes to cyber intelligence in particular within your organization, and to identify a roadmap to get you there. And the last piece is arguably one of the most important pieces, is the business value, right? Because again, as we talked earlier, cybersecurity for cybersecurity folks, cyber intelligence for cyber intelligence folks is great fun, but who's paying for it? So it's the value proposition that we wrap this into, whether again it's business or government. Why is having this type of certification important from a business perspective? Right? There's always a catchphrase that's going around, cybersecurity as a business enabler, and that's the end point of this certification, is understanding why it's important from a business perspective, to help you develop a business case, to mature your project or program, to help you explain and help other people understand the value proposition that cybersecurity is to your organization. So, in a nutshell, in 3 minutes, that's the overview of the certification program. As was discussed, 40 hours, 7 to 8 courses within that 40-hour time frame, with a test at the end to bone the chops of everybody up and get everybody qualified and talented and skilled and walk out of there with something that you can use the next day. And that's really the point of these certifications. So, questions? Yep. So we've actually had some limited discussions around what that looks like going forward. We haven't come to a final decision on that. We're hopefully going to be deciding that in the next 2 to 3 months prior to the launch of these courses, so we can have an answer to that question. Because this does change. Your point's made, right? Cybersecurity, these certifications And the impact of these certifications will change, and it's important to stay on top of cybersecurity because, every day there's a new breach, a new type of breach with IoT, your refrigerator making coffee in the morning, whatever the case may be. Those introduce new threats. So we want to make sure our courseware is on top of that and it reflects the newest information and develops a community of professionals who have these certifications so that when you go to different conferences, you can, oh yeah, I read CPE, I got that, that works, and so it's actually building your career. So, any other questions? No? Oh, ah.
I know this is a graduate institute, but for the certifications, do you have to have a college degree before you take the certification? Because I know someone who's a security professional that I think would be perfect, but he doesn't have a degree.
Correct. This is just, you do not. Yep, yep, yep. So we want to offer this in a stair-step process, right? You want to speak to that?
Yeah. There are a couple things that are ongoing behind the scenes that I'd like to just inform you about.
Yep.
There are approximately 13 courses that have been developed, are in the stage of development, are currently being taught. And these are going to be introduced into the normal IWP curriculum, where students come to get either an existing certificate in another discipline or one of 5 different master's degrees. We are building on those 13 courses and introducing them into the Cyber Intelligence Initiative for very specific, if you will, professional mid-career education. Various certificates, and there are 7 certificates from these 13 courses, all right? The instructors for those various certificates are going to be scholar practitioners. You'll notice, for example, on your agenda that I'm identified as a lead instructor. Well, I'm not a counterintelligence professional. We'll talk with Jim in a moment. But as the academic at IWP, I can put the methodology together. I can develop the course with the likes of Jim and others. So all these certificates will be taught by scholar practitioners. Peter Singer, John Simone, others who are available at the time depending on what the certificate is. So you will get from the professionals their take. Depending on the certificate, there may be anywhere from 4 to 5 or more modules in that 1 week's time. So for example, in the counterterrorism professional certificate, which I will be a subject matter expert on, we will have 10 different modules over that course of 1 week. You don't need a master's degree to participate. You just need to demonstrate some interest in that particular field. I suspect some of these certificates will have a bit of vetting for security purposes, but nothing draconian. And some of them are still in the works with law enforcement to ensure that what we do is legitimate, if you will. I'll talk in a moment about the counterterrorism one, and you can probably speculate if we're looking at particular groups, how do we do that, and how do we do that legally, and how do we do that and keep everyone on this side of the law and not become part of ISIS or Hezbollah or some of the other groups we're going to be looking at. But I'll talk about that in a moment.
Cool. So that gives a good framework. Yep. Question.
No, for now, the certificates, the certifications, the 7 certifications are going to be face-to-face, as you say. And you see the dates if you, I believe you have a handout on when these week programs are going to be held for the respective certification. So I'm just looking at mine, for example, Cyber Intelligence and Counterterrorism is going to occur on October 24th through 28th at the Institute of World Politics.
You're next. You're next.
Someone
other
else?
questions?
I am. So, as a practitioner, one of the things that I look at when I'm looking at models and organizational building is how to deal with crisis. And for me, with my exposure to cyber intelligence, that a cyber attack is one of those things that happens, and it happens very quickly without warning, and you want to know how you can deal with it as opposed to a traditional security threat or traditional crisis threat or model. Can you talk about crisis development and how
So,
Great question.
yep, so in the cyber intelligence professional certification, the crisis, we organize that into 3 areas, really, strategic, operational, tactical, to be a placeholder for people, right? So crisis management is a strategic response. What do I do? How do I do it? But it's triggered by something tactically. So in the course, we talk about, all right, how do you identify a problem? And what does it look like? And what are the dependencies? And what do you do? Both technically, but then non-technical. Again, because there's cyber for cyber is just cyber. Cyber for business is where the value is, right? That's why we're all in here, right? So we actually are able to track through, here's an incident, here's the intelligence around it, how do you manage that technically? How does that translate into the business speak? So you can get ROI, so you can talk about crisis management and response, because some of the use cases are pretty broad and pretty dramatic, right? Some intelligence brief or a leak or hack over here actually can cause some significant nation-state activity. Well, from a corporation managing crisis, you don't want to go shooting your mouth off, right? So there's an issue around how to deal with that. So those are the things we walk through in the use cases. Yep.
And I teach a course at IBP on crisis management if you want to register in the fall. I'm joking, but I mean, I'm not joking. You can take the course, but let me. What?
It's a good class.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions or comments? All right, I want to talk about cyber counterintelligence professional certification, which is probably actually more accurately identified as John Simone would have, which is counter cyber intelligence professional, where we are going to examine the methodology, the tradecraft, the importance of counterintelligence as it applies in the cyber domain. I will just give you a brief kind of a logistical, methodological approach, but I'm going to defer to Jim, who is our national, if you will, guru on cyber counterintelligence, serving as the NIM at Director of National Intelligence. And I think the way to listen to what the two of us have to say is I'm going to describe for you the modalities of the certificate, and he's going to describe the value of this particular certification from the perspective of a senior professional who would want his subordinates, his colleagues, to be more professional in that particular field, what he's looking for, what he values, why a certificate of this nature would be of importance to someone in his position. All right, so the modalities for the CCIP, and I have to remind myself, it's not the Central Committee of, being with I and P. It's 1 week. It will be built upon 10 different modules. Each module is a condensed element of these 13 courses that I mentioned to you earlier. Not all 13 are applicable to this particular field. And every certificate, I forgot to mention this, every certificate, each of the 7 is going to have a foundational core of 3 particular modules. So regardless of which certification you may sign up for, or all of them, there will be a bit of redundancy if you take more than one, because the first day is going to be an introduction into, I believe it's the cyber intelligence professional, the foundations of cyber intelligence, and kind of a basic technical background to make sure that everyone is on at least a beginning, relatively level playing field before we get into the specifics of the profession. We are going to have people who've worked in the counterintelligence field, people from the FBI, from DIA, from the Directorate of National Intelligence and elsewhere, who will explain, express, discuss their tradecraft and the relevance of their tradecraft in today's counterintelligence arena, particularly in the cyber counterintelligence arena. So for that, I'll hand this over to Jim, who can speak to the specifics or the subject matter of CI.
Okay, well, thanks. As both Geoff and John have said, I'm the National Intelligence Manager for Cyber, and you're probably going, what the heck is a NIM? Well, when Jim Clapper became the DNI in 2010, he created the position of National Intelligence Managers to be his senior substantive advisors on key areas and to be able to drive collection analysis, capability formulation, and work with policy on a number of areas, including cyber. So I'm supposed to be driving cyber intelligence within the government. Prior to that, I helped build, monitor, and coordinate the implementation of the comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative for 6 years, which means I'm supposed to know something about cybersecurity writ large, and that included a CI component. And prior to that, I actually ran the National Counterintelligence Office for a number of years as well. So I sit at the nexus of all three of these things, and there clearly is an overlap between cyber intelligence, counterintelligence, security, and cybersecurity. Now, let me make this interactive now. This is a pop quiz. What is the default term that we call a malicious cyber activity against a target or victim? What do we call it? Cyber attack, okay? But what are 99-point-something% of them? What is the intruder really doing in the vast majority? Are they doing something destructive or disruptive, i.e. genuinely attacking that target? What are they doing?
Espionage.
Recon, espionage. They're stealing stuff. Okay, what profession's job is it to counter espionage? Counterintelligence, okay? That's something that we would look to the folk who are working on this track to do. So the reality is that's the modality of that we see more than anything else in terms of describing malicious activity. Cyber's a means to an end. And everybody does cyber. They do it for a purpose. Foreign intelligence services do cyber. Now, the tricky part is we don't always know it's a foreign intelligence service. We don't know who's doing it. But the default position on a lot of the activity that's systemic, the activity that is the most threatening to the organizations you're going to be within or working with, is probably coming from a group of that sort. That makes it something where I would look to people coming into this field who are certified professionals to have some understanding of the plans, capabilities, and operating methods of big foreign intelligence organizations. Another thing where there's an intersection with another one of your tracks, the malicious insider. I mean, IT has been a productivity multiplier for those folk as well. The day when you needed to bring out Mack truckloads of stuff to clean out the secrets of an enterprise, now gone to where you put it on your thumb drive and it walks out in your pocket. So I would look to the CI professional to be able to help to figure out how you deal with the malicious insider threat within your organization. And then there's finally the holy grail, the one that I call faith-based analysis within the cyber community, the integrity of the supply chain for goods and services. I mean, this is one where we say, we, the U.S. government, know how to do this to people and not get caught doing it. Done right, a penetration and manipulation of the supply chain is very, very, put as many of those in front of it as you want, difficult to detect. Fairly difficult to do, very difficult to detect. We can do it, therefore we assume they can do it. I don't think I need the fingers of both hands to tell you the number of documented cases of penetrations of the IT supply chain, not counterfeiting bolts on an airplane, but genuine IT-based penetrations. That's something that's a huge problem because we don't know how much we're hemorrhaging through that. You heard Peter talk about how much we think we're losing in IP theft. We have some statistic for that. We don't even know how bad the supply chain problem is, much less how to do risk mitigation. I would look for the CI professional to be the one to help find good solutions for that. Frankly, we've been admiring that problem, spending a lot of money on that problem over the past 15 plus years. We need more help. We need fresh ideas. We need new blood coming into that field. So let me throw it open to questions, not about the certification. I'll toss that back to those two gentlemen. And I also am going to have to leave in 2:15 at 2:15, not because you're boring, but because I have to go speak in the other track as well. So any questions for me in my capacity in OD&I as the person who kind of sits over all of this? Yes?
understand things like the supply chain?
There could be one approach. My personal opinion is you probably won't find one standard because you wouldn't want the same standard of due diligence applied to, say, JWICs as you would to the integrity of the phone you want to be able to get from your, on your next cell phone plan. So for some things, the standard and the expectation of care is going to be a lot higher. For some things, you're actually going to want to say, I may actually need to build some kind of hardware-based root of trust in to the solution. And in other things, I'm just going to have to do due diligence and look for things that go bump in the night and find that as a way to say, okay, I have a problem. So I'm afraid one size doesn't fit all on this, but we've had an effort that DOD and Department of Homeland Security have been doing for a long time. We have NIST doing things in this space, but frankly, individual agency efforts are woefully inadequate and highly inconsistent. But I don't think a universal, a standardized approach would be good. A standard, single standard, probably not viable.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more of a chart that people can go to get that information.
So-
what level it's at.
So actually, there's an organization called CIS Benchmarks. And to use your example with the Juniper router that was breached, right? So all hardware that you can buy, servers, switches, hardware for computer networks, et cetera, all come with a standard configuration from the manufacturer. You can go online as a hacker, you can go online, get that configuration, and start poking at people's networks, and that's the way in. Right? The number 2-way breach after humans, bad guys get in, is IT configuration mismanagement. Right? So as an example of that Juniper router, having that configured to its most secure settings after you get it out of the box is somewhat of that, speaks to the degree of that standard that you're talking about. And this organization called CIS does a monthly benchmark. And what they do, they provide services to the multi-state ISAC too. So they're dealing with all 50 states and all types of threats. And they realized a few years ago, wait a minute, all these people are having internal mechanical problems as their threats. Let's go out and look at the different stacks, technology stacks, so servers and routers and switches, and figure out how those are how those should be configured to the most secure standard possible. And then so that everybody knows, if you buy this switch and this router and this server and this, configure them this way and they'll be the most secure, then from there you do whatever you want within your network. Change passwords, right? But that's actually one organization that we're aware of that has that recommendation. But again, it's just a recommendation. It's not a standard, right? So NIST comes out with all these great, here's what you should do and shouldn't do, which are good generally, but the benchmarks, they update every month. So that might be a place to go.
One thing I would look for folk who are going to be CI practitioners to bring to this is actually a recognition of the totality of the supply chain, because too often people focus on the front end of the supply chain. It's a manufacturing thing. When the product is delivered and installed, it's over. Well, I got to tell you, having lived as a humenter, a lot of the supply chain stuff gets done in the operations and maintenance or even after the retirement of a product. So the people who look at it as a manufacturer or vendor product problem only are essentially missing the back end of the life cycle for the supply chain. So again, it's having folk who would take this kind of credential, be able to say, well, it's not just a matter of did you buy this and did you configure it according to that. Who's coming in to do the updates? Do you have a VPN back to the manufacturer? And then what do we do with the stuff when we're done with it? Where's it going? That's the holistic perspective I would look for a CI practitioner to bring to the cyber issue.
Good point.
Yeah, I'll just mention, Larry's question. You can look at some of these service departments and their acquisition arms. So we might want to look at CCOM or the Navy Single IT Technical Authority. So those acquisition offices, Inaugural, they're going to have their own standards. And so they're trying to at least establish some type of standards to satisfy the products that they produce and deliver to the user community. That's one area where you might want to
Very cool. Very cool.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask something on the supply chain, looking at the digital. When we are talking about the supply chain, are we looking at the digital supply
supply chain, and how do we go about this, looking at also digital transfers, things to do with digital is where many people are affected when it comes to cyber security. So how do we do this as businesses, though I'm going in the session for the business? So this is another problem, digital supply chain, digital transfers, and digital education. This is where more of the information is transferred, or the bad guys steal from the cyber security. So what makes it hard, and how can we protect it?
Well, yeah, actually, I guess we're getting a good discussion about the supply chain, and that's one where it goes. You really have to do, it's an exercise in risk management. I mean, if you're a business, you have to say, what assets do I care about that will touch that particular artifact of the supply chain? And then what's the worst case? I mean, it's just the classic way one would do the risk management, and then you figure out what appropriate due diligence is in that place, in that case. In some places, it means you have to have trusted vendors. In some places, it means you have lockdown configuration. In some places, it means you have instrumentation that at least does spot checks on the operation to see if you see any anomalies. But it really comes down to, you know, if I'm talking about supply chain for a nuclear plant and for core operations, well, spot check isn't going to do it. But if I'm talking about something that's in my broader workforce on my corporate network, you know, being able to spot 1 out of 1,000 things that's a breach might be good enough. So it truly comes down to saying, what am I trying to, what realistically are the assets of the business that transit that particular part of the IT infrastructure, and therefore what's a reasonable cost, to put it back in that value proposition term. How much am I spending to do a reasonable cost at insuring myself against the likelihood of loss?
All right, well, if you'll join me in giving Mr. Richburg a round of applause as he goes to the next room. And next, we're going to hear from Mr. Hancock again, talking about cyber intelligence and active defense.
All right. So there's been a lot of talk about active defense, especially the Target breach, JP Morgan, Sony, and then OPM. So much talk about active defense on the Hill. Executives congressmen are very upset why we're not hacking back, how can we hack back. It's becoming a trending conversation is my point. People are very interested in what that means. How can we go back and get our data? How can we go get our stuff back? There's a lot of technical components to going after active defense. There's a lot of confusion, quite frankly, on what active defense is and isn't. Is it hacking back? No. Is it offensive cybersecurity? No. Corporations, like we mentioned earlier today, corporations and government agencies largely execute cybersecurity in a defensive posture, right? Defense. Active defense means you're being a bit more proactive, essentially, in what you want to do. And there's specific methods that we discuss in the course about how to do that. We talk about the legal aspects because those are extremely important because there are certain laws that you can break pretty fast when you're executing some active defense methods, which we clarify and codify out in this course so that everybody is understand. If we go this far, it's going to be a problem. And here's the federal agencies you need to start talking to. But we also discuss the capabilities, the method, the process, and the technical components to some degree, not in the weeds, but enough to know from an active defense cyber intelligence perspective, here's some things you can and can't do, and here's why. Policy, broadly speaking, what's legal, what's not legal. An implementation plan as far as where you are today in your organization, how you can create a plan, why is it important to create a plan, and federal agency relationships that you must have when you start thinking about this, because it's extremely important to have that in place. So we go through a whole method of what active defense is through a definition, as we have up there, the definitions, the policy implications, the corporate government methods of active defense. What does that look like today? What's being done today? Both domestically and internationally in this space. And then we walk through about a half a dozen use cases as to where this has happened in the recent, as far back as 5 years, and as recent as a few months, 6 months ago. to really walk students through the course. What roles do you play? How do you manage the crisis aspect? A methodology and a life cycle associated with that, as well as organization and operations. So we help the people taking the class get a grounding in what it looks like to create an active defense capability within your organization. From grabbing together components, desperate components within your network, within your company, to create something that helps you start thinking forward, helps the organization start considering what could happen, and then how do you apply that. There's certainly an intersection with cyber intelligence professional and active defense, and we go into what that means and what that looks like to help, again, define the roles and the value proposition so that at the end of the day, when you need investment in this area because you think your organization is particularly at risk, our goal is to actually help you understand what the investment should look like, what the value proposition could be, should be for your organization. Again, all towards helping companies and organizations not only do cybersecurity from a defensive posture, but start looking at it of how do you actively protect yourself, right? Not just from, we have a policy that everybody needs to change their password every 30 days, which is proactive, but a bit deeper. All right, how do you gather the intelligence within your network? How do you know what who's going to be attacking you? Types of threats. A little bit like we talked earlier with threat modeling, but then how that ties into what your response patterns are. And again, like I've got up there, the business value. Why is that very important for the non-technical people in your organization to understand why are you investing in active defense within the organization? And again, general counselors are great. They get very concerned about that when they hear this word. But that's one of the aspects that we talk about, the legal implications, so that you can say, yes, legally, we go this far and we don't go any further. But this addresses, again, broadly speaking, this certification addresses a growing need for organizations to do something more proactively. And the idea is to help train people and certify people in this space so that they have the right tools. So it's not just, oh, we're hacking back, and that's the way we're going to get it done, because that's not what you want to do. But we really want to empower people and educate people through a series of process and methodology as far as how to do this, and again, that value proposition. So, any questions? Yep.
So you talk about the legality of the domestic side of the house of the United States for CNA and C&D and everything. Are you guys going to go in the broad scope of the international law? Because it's kind of no real, like, oh, don't do this, don't do how this, like, pretty much genetic for international. You guys are going to do this.
So yes, actually, and the reason for that is when we talk about executing active defense, a lot of the corporations are international. A lot of agencies are international. So there's always that international, okay, you need to be aware. What are the laws in the other countries? Just to be aware, right? We're not training anybody to go off and do active defense at a very tactical, specific level, but we want to be able to empower people to know where the lines are. You've got to know what you can do and can't do and what's legal and what's not legal so you can keep track of it, but so that you can make the most out of this. Again, this is a tool set. We want to train people and certify people in a set of tools and capabilities so that they can protect themselves more. And your point's well made, right? There is definitely the international aspect of this because companies are international. We can't avoid that. So that is a part of the course is the domestic and international legalities and what those look like and how to address those safely. So, yep. Any other questions? No? Okay.
Okay, I think last one is...
The last one, Professor Sigronis will talk about intelligence, cyber intelligence, and counterterrorism.
Yeah, these get, your tongue gets numb after a while trying to twist around this. The cyber intelligence / counterterrorism certificate is not too dissimilar from the cyber counterintelligence certificate in that both certifications examine how the cyber domain is used and exploited for a particular purpose. In the first case, it's to collect intelligence, and I think you can imagine the mind-opening experience of thinking about all the new ways one can collect intelligence and how you would then counter it in the first certificate. This one examines the ways in which foreign and domestic terrorist organizations exploit or use the cyber domain to advance their missions objectives, their organization's objectives. So how do they recruit? How do they propagate their ideology? How do they acquire resources, financial or otherwise? How do they collect intelligence? How do they conduct operational planning? How do they develop their strategies? We have not yet seen in the world, fortunately, a cyber terrorist attack where we've had mass death, mass destruction cybernetically by a terrorist organization. So this is not a certificate expecting that to occur, but we clearly see many organizations using the cyber domain to advance their particular interests in all these different ways. This particular certificate is going to be case-based driven, so we will examine a select group of organizations in the real world and how they actually recruit, how do they conduct propaganda ventures, how do they acquire resources, how have they conducted operational plans. But you can probably imagine from the description here, when we get into how do they use social media and exploit the so-called dark web, that gets us close to real-time operational endeavors that we have to coordinate and deconflict with law enforcement, U.S. law enforcement. But because of the faculty that we have, we believe we'll be able to do that in an educational environment, if you will. There'll be, again, 10 modules over that 1-week period. Again, 3 of those modules are going to be foundational modules that you'll see in all the other 6 certifications. And then the remaining 7 will be specific to counterterrorism. We will look at ISIS, Hezbollah, a number of other organizations. Yes?
So I know that West Point Military Academy, they had some kind of experiment where they did try to recruit some terrorist organizations, most notably ISIS.
Yep.
Will you be exploring cases like that, especially through legal means?
Well, that's when I'm referring to engaging in the dark web and looking at social media and now becoming a more active participant, if you will, in the education process. That's where we have to deconflict with law enforcement to ensure we don't overstep the bounds of, we're still, it's an educational endeavor. We're not an operational arm of, the intelligence community to conduct these operations. That's where we have to find our red lines, if you will. Yes? And then,
It would seem to me that a lot of, like you're talking about, the counterterrorism, just to me, it seems a little like it's a kind of active defense, but it also would require that you have at least that you also have subject matter expertise on certain case studies, a certain background, or at least experience with human intelligence as well.
all of them. All these certificates will, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The instructors will be professionals in the counterterrorism field or the national security or intelligence field more broadly, or law enforcement, embarked on countering terrorism, and now we are introducing how do we conduct that counter-terrorist activity in the cyber domain. And ironically, although this may have come up earlier, this is one field where youth dominates. There's a new generation of terrorists out there, unfortunately, who are very cyber savvy, and many of the traditional counter-terrorist operatives we have are less so. They're older and are used to a different modus operandi.
Thanks.
I'm sorry?
Thanks.
So we do see a generational divide, if you will, but we have some pretty spectacular experts who follow the counterterrorism field quite closely who can lend their experience to this certification. Yes, ma'am.
So, would you actually have a lab environment that we work in, where the students would actually be on computers, and we'd actually go out to see some of the sites?
Go out to see some of the sites. You want to go visit ISIS blogs and start...
I've been in a class before where
These will all be conducted at school. Depending on the certification, there'll be different different setups, if you will. Industrial control systems is one that's going to, it's a module that will get us into how industrial control systems operate generically at a plant or facility and how they can be exploited. So one might venture to a location where a SCADA system is in operation, and you would see how potentially one could manipulate the SCADA system, which is what happened at the Natanz facility in Iran. We're not going to go to Iran, but you'll see
And then
experiences.
actually, that's actually a good question. So in the other courses, in the cyber intelligence professional and the active defense in cyber intelligence professional, that's a component of the course, right? Learning what the bad guys do, understanding what they say, how they work. So there's some fine lines there, certainly, which we get guidance from, particularly the National Counterterrorism Training Center. Some good folks there that would help, ensure that we're not going too far, but that everybody, you get access, you look at things, right? We're not talking everybody in a classroom digging into the dark web, interacting with ISIS. Not that at all. But observing what's going on from a safe distance for obvious reasons.
That's what I was saying, it's like in a lab environment.
Yeah, like John said, in some classes it'll be a lab type environment. Some classes it'll just be a lecture. It depends.
I'll just give you an example. I teach a course, a regular course at IBP on what I call cyber statecraft and national security, which is kind of a high-level strategic overview of cyber security for the United States. I have a module in that 15-week course where I have a white hacker. He was here earlier today. Geoff, I don't know if he's here in the room right now. And I can give him my laptop and I say, over to you, and show us how you can take over my computer. It's pretty scary, and I do trust him, and he's an ethical hacker, but he'll demonstrate for the students how easy it is for him, not knowing anything about me, to quickly know a lot about me and take over my computer. And then all the other things that can happen once he's able to do that. As an example, just to show the vulnerability in that particular course. And we will, again, I want to be careful here, we will get to as real, if you will, an exploration of our adversaries in the foreign terrorist organization, domestic terrorist organization field, without crossing the line. And that's something that I'm very careful about right now, and that's what I'm negotiating with law enforcement. Okay. Any other questions? No? Sir.
Some of the darknet sites, they change very rapidly, like they could be active one day and then dead the next. Will that be, incorporated into the curriculum in any way?
As a method of operation of the bad guys. So cyber intelligence, the purpose of that is to say there's internal and external intelligence that you get from doing this type of work. And the external intelligence is understanding why would they switch it on and off? What would they do? That happens very frequently, especially when there's phishing mails, phishing campaigns, I should say, especially coming from North Africa. The switch on and off thing happens quite a bit. But that falls within the methods of the bad guys, which is important to understand when you're doing threat modeling, and important to understand when your active defense method comes up. What do you do? How do you know what to do? Right. So it's a study on both sides.